Don't make the same mistakes with your podcast as I made with mine. Today, I'm sharing you the lessons from my podcasting journey. My first lesson was actually that I delayed starting my podcast for far too long. I had lots of people that I'd met across my travels and then also in my business journey that had asked if I had a podcast and then also that recommended that I started a podcast. I pretty much just did not listen. And this ultimately then cost me because it took me a lot of time and a lot of courage in a way to then eventually hit start record. So if I was to go back again, I would have that courage sooner to simply hit record and to test it out. Because ironically, as soon as I did hit record, 5 minutes into my first episode with Caleb Nelson, and I had that feeling, I was like, man, this is so much fun. I wish I'd started sooner. So the question for you is, why haven't you started yet? So the lesson is don't keep delaying something that you don't even know anything about. Try it out, see if you like it, and then you can make a decision. The next lesson for me was actually doing better guest research. When I first started, I would listen to maybe some podcasts and I would prepare some questions, but I didn't go into that much detail. So I didn't always feel fully prepared going into my podcast and interviewing the guests that I had on the show. And eventually, really, this was a disservice to them. Now what I do is I create a full dossier. I do loads of research on every single guest that comes onto the show, and I prepare lots and lots of questions, probably around 20 or so different questions that I may or may not ask. This allows me to get straight into the meat and bones of an episode and to truly enhance the experience for the listener and the viewer. So the lesson there for you also is do a lot of research on your guests so that you can have the highest quality podcast episode that you can create. Another lesson for me was actually scripting my episodes too much. I would prepare questions that I felt like I had to ask the person that was on the episode with me. However, now I realize is that it's better if it's a natural conversation that flows, that I just steer the ship on. So I still prepare lots and lots of questions, but I don't feel the obligation to have to ask those questions. I'm just going to continue the conversation and then navigate it towards the questions that I want to ask. This allows for a much better listening experience for those that are checking out the episode. So the lesson there for you is don't overscript. Have an idea of the questions you want to ask, but allow the conversation to take tangents. That is where all the diamonds in the rough are. Another lesson from my podcasting experience is actually some of the unconscious habits that I would have. I didn't notice that in multiple episodes, I'm sat on my office chair spinning and I'm just doing this, or I'm sat there and I may be knocking or tapping whilst I'm actually interviewing this guest. I didn't even realize it until I asked for some constructive feedback and then my guests let me know. The lesson there for you is to actually watch your recordings back and check to see if there's anything happening in the video that you don't want to be happening in every single episode. This could be tapping, this could be biting your nails, this could be looking in the wrong camera, the wrong direction, it could be getting distracted, whatever it may be. You just want to review your own footage and make sure you don't have any unconscious habits that are affecting the quality of the episode. The next lesson for me was actually overcomplicating the systems within the podcast and the setup. What you actually need to start a podcast is a computer or a laptop that's going to allow you to record, and then you need a microphone. That is it. If you go onto YouTube, you're going to see, the multiple different cameras, audio, lighting, everything that you need, and it all of a sudden gets way too complex. And if you're anything like me, that meant that you didn't hit record. So what I needed to do was start with minimum equipment and then build my way up to, higher quality equipment and better recording software. So the lesson there for you is hit record and then improve the quality as you go. Another lesson for me was actually overbooking my calendar. So this was a combination of overbooking the amount of guests that I would record in a single week. Plus, because of other work commitments, I was putting too many calls into my calendar before and after a podcast episode. This meant that I was sometimes late to starting the podcast episode with that guest, which was unprofessional on my side, and I need to do better than that. It also meant that if I had any calls or any commitments after recording the episode, I was tired because, recording these podcasts can take a lot of energy. So when you're booking your guests into your calendar for your podcast, ensure that you give yourself some buffer space before and after. You're also going to need time for the processing of the recordings to take place. If I was going straight into another call, this can be affected by the recordings that I'm now processing. Another lesson for me was to have the pre-recording checklist. When I first started, I did not check that my microphone was working, that my video was set up, that my background looked tidy. By creating a pre-recording checklist, this allows me to check that all the fundamentals and the basics are set up and good to go. Overall, I've absolutely loved getting into this podcasting game, and I'm so glad that I eventually did hit record. If you're new, go and hit record, try it out, see if you enjoy creating a podcast, and then you can improve as you go. I would love to know any challenges or lessons that you have had from starting your own podcast journey. If you've got some, let me know in the comments down below. My name is Samuel Main, and I truly hope that you've got value from today's video. If you have, please do hit like and subscribe down below, and I'll see you in the video tomorrow.